Hey everyone, my name's Juliana, and this is Juliana Talks Films, the channel where I examine films and filmmakers. If you love films and filmmaking, consider subscribing for weekly videos. In today's episode, we'll be exploring filmmaking advice from director Noah Baumbach. The New York native debuted his first feature-length film at the tender age of 26 during the 1995 New York Film Festival. Both of his parents were previously film critics, which influenced Noah from a very young age. His films often portray characters who are in arrested development, who then must confront their circumstances and issues in order to progress on in life. His films include the previously mentioned Kicking and Screaming, Frances Ha, The Meyerowitz Stories, and most recently, Marriage Story. Beyond directing, he's also written a handful of feature-length films, some of which are with good friend Wes Anderson, including The Life Aquatic and Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Are you cussing with me?
Noah has a keen sensibility for character exploration and setting up complex family dynamics. He's become a well-known director in recent years for these very traits. So then here are Noah Baumbach's top 5 lessons on filmmaking. Lesson 1, framing shapes the story's tone.
Visually, we're always in the perspective of Charlie or Nicole, or both of them, because they're in, one or the other is in every scene. So in a lot of these scenes too, we're always over one. If it's Charlie and Ray Liotta's character, we're always over Charlie's shoulder. We're never over Ray's. So it's always Charlie's perspective of what's happening, and often, he's sitting too, so we often thought about, well, that sort of low perspective of feeling kind of, that there's something kind of aggressive and overwhelming about these experiences in these places, and then later when Charlie and Nicole are, say, in the mediation at Nora's conference room, or when they're at in the courtroom, we're still always with Charlie and Nicole. Even when the lawyers talk, we're with them. So we're always staying in their perspective, which I think also it makes it more subjective in that way. It's designed to be invisible, but I think it always keeps you with them, and that, I think, also adds to what you're saying, this sort of sense of menace, too, because it's their experience of these places. For the lawyers, they go to these places all the time. This is their workplace. It's not, they're not going to have that experience. So, so that was something we did very specifically. We looked at, references, like we looked at Dr. Strangelove, because I thought, that movie has so many people at tables, and it's a comedy, but it also has this sort of surreal, menacing quality to it, and how they were shot, and the sort of sort of in the war room, you have the kind of wide and that sort of strange stage that it feels like at times, and these kind of like really kind of arch angles, and so we thought about that a bit, particularly in the courtroom and sequences with Ray Liotta's character, because he's he could be in that war room, I feel like, in Doctor Strange.
Lesson 2, always construct your scene.
I mean, we rehearsed the whole movie in before we shot, and we rehearsed nearly every scene. We would go to the location and rehearse in the location, but we knew for that one, I mean, I think it was like an 11-page scene, and we shot it for 2 days, and it's a 10-minute sequence in the movie. So first it was about getting the language, just everybody familiar, like that. The language is a lot of it, where they overlap, all those things are in the script, and so getting them just comfortable with it, and the rhythm and the pace, and it's almost like a warm-up. Then we would go into the space itself, again, before we've started shooting, and we blocked everything out, so every movement is, we have it all down. The script supervisor has it all, and we have everything kind of planned out. And then as well, I had with Jen, my editor, we had the close-ups, because there's a series of close-ups where we get closer and closer, so till their faces are really take over the whole screen. And I knew on what line and what piece of a word I wanted to cut on. But I always wanted to be physical as well as verbal. So I had them. I would give them sort of motions. So I'd say like, okay, but say it, but turn into it, or lunge forward, or sit down. So I knew I could then cut on these moments. So everything, in a sense, was very technically blocked out with their, it was all things that they could feel comfortable within. If they didn't feel like, oh, I don't want to stand on this line, we wouldn't do it. We would find another way into it. But they're both so good that they're kind of they can find a kind of immediacy and truth in whatever you give them, in a way. So then when we're shooting the thing, we shot with one camera, and we're kind of ready. And I feel like then it gives them, it's almost like, think of almost like blocking out an action sequence. It's like they have all the sort of safe space, everything is taken care of, that they can just be and just do it and just let go. And they did. And they brought so much of themselves to the whole movie, but that sequence in particular, really took a lot out of them. I mean, it was exhausting. It was exhausting, that whole 2 days, and we'd have to take breaks, and it was the hardest thing, the most difficult thing I've had to do as a director, but also the most rewarding for the same reasons. And
then you had to go and edit those scenes, and did it relive the emotion?
It was it's a lot of footage, and also because that scene is very much about momentum as well. So it's difficult for them. Like, it'd be hard to say, let's just pick up on this line in the middle while you're shouting. They would go back and have to redo the scene to get to the moment that we knew we needed, or we wanted to pick it up at. So there was a lot of runway at every time too, which again was just exhausting. So then when we're looking at the material, we're watching we watch every take, and there were 2 days of multiple takes of long sequences, because that scene is also shot, at least parts of it are shot in long takes, and they're walking around. So that was also exhausting for us to go through it again. And that continued. The mix of the movie, we would have to stop too, because it was so it's just a lot. But again, that so gratifying, because it was so. It was exciting. There's catharsis in that scene too. I mean, I think part of the blocking of that scene. What made it, I think, intuitive for the actors is that we discovered that it, in a way, mirrored their kind of relationship for a lot of the movie. Charlie is not really confronting what's happening, and she is, and she's kind of going forward, trying to get him to focus, and he keeps finding things. He's going to do a dish right now. He's going to go into Henry's room and make sure his backpack is ready for school, or whatever he's got, and it's when he finally comes forward, you feel the cost. You understand why he's been, that he's been defending himself, and not, and that is what happens in that scene. And as painful as it is, it's also necessary, I think, for him. I mean, it didn't necessarily, the things that go on in that scene didn't have to happen, but it did. And given that it did, this goes to what I was saying earlier. I think one way of looking at it is the movie is about her building herself up and finding a voice, refinding a voice, and his story is a kind of about breaking himself down.
Lesson 3, and my personal favorite, give yourself time to learn.
Mr. Jealousy was an interesting experience for me, because in some ways I hadn't learned the lesson that I said I'd learned just before, which was that I was sort of trying to do a lot of things at once with that movie, and I think I was trying to do something more traditional, but I was also, you know, my impression of that movie, although I haven't seen it in a long time, is that that it's the things that I would probably still like about it, but I felt it was also a hard production. I had a hard time with the producers, and it kind of never felt quite right to me, and then it didn't do very well, and you know, and I think that sort of set me back in terms of my ability to get something made at the time, and that was hard because I was sort of feeling like I felt like I was still learning, and I felt like I was, you know, and stupidly, of course, I was in my 20s, and I felt like, you know, God, this has all taken so long to have this happen, and you know, and looking back at it, I think like that's, you know, it all happened so quickly. It was the opposite was what was happening, and then when this didn't quite go how I wanted it to, I think I sort of, it's not that I was like, oh, I've got to sort of figure something out. I really was just trying to get another movie made at the time. But retrospectively, I think I went through a period of kind of discovering in a more substantial way what kind of films I wanted to make, and kind of both who I was as a person and as a filmmaker. Not to sound like too grandiose about the whole thing, but I mean it was a hard time for me because I felt like I was suddenly, I'd made 2 movies and I was 27, and I felt like I was nowhere in some way, and which of course wasn't true, but I also I think it was in retrospectively, I'm glad it happened how it did.
Lesson 4, write what you're drawn to.
Ideas or areas that are interesting to me that kind of circulate in my head for a while, and when I sit down to start something new, it comes to the fore. Some other idea draws it out. I mean, in the case of While We're Young, I wanted to make something about couples for a while, but I couldn't find the right story or the right way, and I think musings on middle age or, you know, started to make that accessible. I'm not really aware or thinking about themes as I'm writing. You know, afterward I can talk about it if pressed, but I'm not thinking that this is all some kind of continual conversation that I'm having. I'm just trying to make the next movie. I'll sort of ruthlessly draw from everything. I'll be out with friends and somebody will say something and it will suddenly click, oh, that's good for what I'm working on, or my friends now know this and have to make kind of peace with it. You know, when I was working on Squid and the Whale, it was a story actually a friend of mine had told me about how he had pretended to have written a song. In his case it was a Who song, in the movie it was a Pink Floyd song. And that I didn't do that, but it felt so much like something that could have come from my childhood or could have come from the story I was writing. So I asked him if I could use it because, you know, and in a way, by the time I'd finished writing the movie, it might as well have been mine. It didn't matter anymore. I see a great movie and I'll think like, God, they were able to do something, tell a kind of really human story, but in a genre form. And I'm thinking like, why do you keep trying to tell a human story in a just straightforwardly, semi-realistic way? You know, it seems so much easier to make everything a metaphor. I'm not doing it because I don't want to do the other. It's really because it's the way I feel like it's how I see things. It comes out this way, and if I could somehow translate it to space or, you know, Gotham City or something, I would love to do that. I really would. I would love to try to do that. But up until now, I haven't sort of, you know, found a way that you know feels, I guess, authentic, or that I feel like I could communicate effectively, and that other people can do those kind of movies better than I can.
And lesson 5, find your process.
Jen Lame, who edited the movie, this is our maybe 5th movie together. We started on Frances Ha, and she's wonderful. I mean, she's somebody I would, I would wait for her to make a movie. I really feel like Mike Nichols had said once, which I think is a great quote, and it was very true for him because he was an interpretive director. He didn't write, the scripts, but but was such a personal director. And he said, every director needs a buddy, and I think that's true. It can be a lonely business, and that buddy can take on many different forms. It can be more than one buddy. I mean, Adam has been a buddy, but Jen has definitely been a buddy. And what we do is I bring her in. I give her the earliest drafts. And in a sense, what we do is we edit the script the way we're going to edit the movie, so that I can, save. We don't have to shoot this stuff. That we're not gonna, that we're not gonna use. And then I involve her. She'll come to rehearsals. I will. We talk throughout the shoot. We talk twice a day. We talk when I drive to the set. We talk about the day ahead and what I think I want to accomplish and how we see it in the sort of body of the whole movie. And then we talk at lunch about the dailies. We shot on film the dailies, so they come actually 2 days late. So we talked about the dailies from 2 days ago, and did I do all right? What do we need? What did we get it all? So that when we're in the editing room, I feel like we've kind of arrived there together. I mean, it's the same way of working with the actors. It's when we start to shoot, we get on set. We've spent all this prep time. We've rehearsed, and the same thing is true. I see no reason why not to do it with all collaborators, so that you all have as much information, and you've kind of arrived at these things together when the rubber hits the road.
My personal favorite piece of advice from Noah was give yourself time to learn. What about you guys? What was your favorite piece of advice? Leave a comment below and let me know. As always, folks, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I really hope you got something valuable out of this video. Until next time, I'll catch you all in the next one.